Princess Nala's hands shook as she stood in the massive crystal cathedral. Thousands of Krithian nobles filled the glowing seats, all waiting to watch her marry General Vorthak. Her skin, which normally sparkled like diamonds, now flickered with terror. This wasn't supposed to be her life. Just 3 days ago, her father, Emperor Kale, had called her into his private chambers. His once strong voice trembled as he explained the situation. The Empire was falling apart. Rebel planets were breaking away, and the military was split between loyal and corrupt commanders. General Vorthak controlled the largest fleet and had threatened civil war unless he got what he wanted: marriage to the princess and a clear path to the throne. "I'm sorry, my daughter," her father had whispered. "This is the only way to save our people." Now, as Vorthak walked toward her with his cold smile, Nala felt sick. The general was twice her age and known for his cruelty. Stories spread throughout the empire about planets he had burned and civilians he had killed. Once they were married, nothing would stop him from taking over completely. Her father was old and weak. Vorthak would probably have him killed within a year. The ceremony master began chanting in the ancient language. In just minutes, she would be bound to this monster forever. Nala's mind raced, looking for any escape. The cathedral doors were blocked by Vorthak's soldiers. The windows were too high to reach. She was trapped. Then she remembered something from her childhood lessons. Deep in the palace archives, she had read about the old bonding beacons. These ancient devices were created thousands of years ago when Krithian space travel was new. If a ship was damaged or a crew member was lost, the beacon could instantly connect them to the nearest compatible life form for rescue. The technology was considered outdated and dangerous now, but a few beacons still existed in royal ceremonial chambers. Nala's eyes found the small crystal device mounted on the altar's base. It was supposed to be just decoration now, but she knew it still worked. The plan was desperate and probably stupid, but it was her only chance. She hoped the beacon would malfunction. Most of them did, after sitting unused for centuries. At worst, nothing would happen, and she'd be married to Vorthak. At best, maybe it would cause enough confusion for her to escape. As Vorthak reached for her hand, Nala quickly pressed the hidden activation switch on the beacon. She expected nothing. Instead, the crystal blazed with brilliant light. Every person in the cathedral gasped and stepped back. The beacon's energy surrounded Nala like a cocoon, and she felt herself being pulled away by an invisible force. Somewhere in space, Captain Li Jiwon was having a very boring day. His small exploration ship, the Star Wanderer, was mapping empty space near the Krithian system. As a deep space surveyor for the Human Colonial Alliance, he spent months alone collecting data on uninhabited star systems. It was lonely work, but Jiwon preferred the peace of space to the chaos of crowded planets. He was just finishing his daily reports when every alarm on his ship started screaming. The transport beam hit his ship without warning. 1 second he was alone. The next second, a 7-foot-tall alien princess materialized on his bridge in a shower of crystal light. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. Her skin looked like living jewels. Her eyes glowed like silver stars, and she was wearing what looked like a wedding dress made of pure energy. For a moment, they just stared at each other in complete shock. Then reality hit them both at the same time. Jiwon grabbed his emergency communicator, while Nala looked around his tiny ship in amazement. She had never seen human technology before. Everything looked so simple and practical compared to Krithian designs. "What just happened?" Jiwon asked in galactic standard language, hoping she understood. "I activated a bonding beacon," Nala said quickly. "According to ancient law, we are now legally married." Jiwon's face went completely white. "We're what?" Before Nala could explain, Jiwon's long-range sensors detected multiple large ships entering the system. They were moving fast and heading straight for his position. The Krithian Imperial fleet had found them. Jiwon's mind went blank for exactly 3 seconds. Then his military training from the Colonial Defense Force kicked in like a switch being flipped. He had served 2 tours protecting human colonies from pirates before becoming an explorer. The first rule of survival was simple. When someone's shooting at you, everything else can wait. "How many ship?" he asked, his fingers already dancing across the control panel. Nala looked at his primitive scanner display, and her eyes widened. 6 heavy cruisers and 12 destroyers. General Vorthak brought half the Imperial fleet. She paused, watching Jiwon's face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. Too late for sorry, Jiwon muttered, checking his ship's pathetic weapons. 2 small plasma cannons and basic shields. Against 18 Crithian warships, he might as well throw rocks. How fast can those cruisers go? Faster than this ship, Nala said quietly. The first plasma bolts streaked past them, lighting up space in deadly colors. Jiwon threw the star. Wanderer into a spinning dive, using every trick he'd learned dodging pirate attacks. His ship groaned under the stress, but it held together. Barely. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us, Nala observed. Vorthak wants me alive. Lucky. Us? Jiwon said through gritted teeth, as another blast nearly took off their port engine. Any ideas? Because I'm fresh out of miracles. Nala stared at the ship's control systems. They looked so simple compared to Crithian technology, but that might actually be an advantage. Can you give me access to your power grid? What? Why? Just trust me, she said, her hands already reaching for the main control panel. I studied advanced engineering at the Royal Academy. I might be able to help. Jiwon wanted to say no. Letting an alien princess mess with his ship's systems seemed like the worst possible idea, but plasma bolts were getting closer, and his engines were already running at maximum power. They needed a miracle, and she was the only miracle available. Fine, he said, unlocking the engineering controls. But if you blow us up, I'm going to be very upset. Nala's fingers moved across the human controls with surprising skill. Your technology is so different from ours. We focus on raw power, but you focus on efficiency. It's actually quite clever. She paused her work to look at him with genuine curiosity. How do humans survive in space with such basic equipment? We're stubborn, Jiwon replied, dodging another plasma barrage. And we cheat a lot. Despite everything, Nala almost smiled. I'm beginning to understand that. She pulled out a small crystal device from her wedding dress and connected it to the ship's power core. Immediately the engines began humming with new energy. The displays brightened, the shields strengthened, and their speed increased by 30%. What did you just do? Jiwon asked in amazement. Crithian power crystals store energy more efficiently than your fusion cells, Nala explained, working on the navigation system now. I'm also upgrading your sensor array. We need to see them before they see us. The pursuing fleet was falling behind, but they weren't safe yet. Vorthak's ships had better long-range weapons and more fuel. This was just buying them time. Where can we go? Nala asked. Somewhere they can't follow, Jiwon thought quickly. His exploration maps showed dozens of dangerous regions that military ships avoided. The Maelstrom Nebula. It's full of gravitational anomalies and radiation storms. Big ships can't survive in there, but something small like this might make it through. Might. Honestly, probably not. But definitely beats getting captured. Nala looked at this strange human who was risking his life for someone he'd met 5 minutes ago. Among her people, such loyalty had to be earned over years. Why are you helping me? You could surrender and tell them I forced you, Jiwon shrugged, setting course for the nebula. My grandmother always said never trust a man who'd force a woman to marry him. Besides, I've seen what happens to people who cooperate with bullies. They usually end up dead anyway. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Also, she would have liked you. She always said the best partners are the ones who can fix things when everything goes wrong. As they approached the swirling chaos of the Maelstrom Nebula, both of them realized something important. They weren't just running away anymore, they were running together. And somehow that made all the difference. The first energy storm hit their ship like a giant fist, but Nala's upgrades held. They were going to make it. Maybe. General Vorthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Talon, staring at the star map with burning hatred. 3 days had passed since the princess escaped, and every hour made him look weaker in front of his officers. Word was already spreading through the Empire that a single human had made the great General Vorthak look like a fool. Sir, we've tracked them to the Kepler 442 system, reported Commander Zek, trying not to show his fear. Everyone knew Vorthak's temper, and losing the princess had put him in a murderous mood. Good, Vorthak growled. "This ends today. I want every ship in attack formation. We'll crush that pathetic human vessel and drag the princess back in chains." The general had brought 18 of his best warships to hunt down one small exploration craft. To any reasonable person, it seemed like overkill. But Vorthak didn't care about reasonable. He cared about sending a message. No one defied him and lived to tell about it. As they entered the Kepler system, their sensors immediately picked up the fleeing ship's trail. It led straight into the notorious asteroid fields that surrounded the system's dead planets. Most military commanders avoided these fields because they were unpredictable and dangerous. Massive rocks drifted in complex patterns, powered by the gravitational pull of 3 different stars. "They've trapped themselves," Vorthak smiled coldly. "Those asteroid fields are a death trap. We'll wait at the exit points and catch them when they try to escape." But his tactical officer, a veteran named Captain Rix, looked worried. "Sir, our sensors show they're not trying to escape. They're going deeper into the field." "Impossible. No sane pilot would do that." "Sir, the human might not be sane." Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid field, G1 was proving that sanity was overrated. He guided the Star Wanderer through gaps between massive rocks that were barely wider than his ship. Nala watched in amazement as he navigated by memory, predicting exactly where each asteroid would be minutes before they reached it. "How do you know this place so well?" she asked, gripping her seat as they scraped past a mountain-sized rock. "I spent 8 months mapping these fields last year," G1 explained, threading the needle between 2 colliding asteroids. "Most explorers avoid places like this, but I love puzzles. These rocks follow patterns based on gravitational math. Once you understand the equations, it's like reading a book. A book that kills you if you read it wrong. Yeah, but what a way to go." Nala was beginning to understand why humans had survived so long in a galaxy full of stronger species. They were completely insane, but their insanity followed a strange kind of logic. Back on the Iron Talon, Vorthak was losing patience. "Send in 3 destroyers. I want that human ship disabled and brought back immediately." Captain Rix hesitated. "Sir, our ships aren't designed for asteroid field operations. Maybe we should wait for them to come out." "Are you questioning my orders?" Vorthak's hand moved to his weapon. "No, sir, sending the destroyers now." The 3 Crithian destroyers entered the field in standard military formation, their powerful engines and thick armor making them confident. They were built to fight other warships in open space, not to dance between moving rocks. Within minutes, they were struggling to keep up with the much smaller human ship. G1 watched them on his sensors and shook his head. "They're flying like they're in open space. That's going to get them killed." "Maybe we should warn them," Nala suggested, her royal training making her think of honor and proper conduct. "They're here to capture us," G1 reminded her. "Besides, I tried warning a pirate ship about asteroid fields once. They told me to shut up and mind my own business. 5 minutes later, they were space dust." The first destroyer died exactly as G1 predicted. It tried to force its way through a gap that was too narrow, got stuck between 2 asteroids, and was crushed when they collided. The second destroyer lasted longer, but made the mistake of using its main engines at full power. The exhaust melted a small asteroid, creating a cloud of superheated gas that cooked the crew alive. The third destroyer almost made it. Its captain was smarter than the others and tried to copy the human ship's movements. But copying and understanding weren't the same thing. When G1 led them into a section where 3 massive asteroids were about to converge, the destroyer couldn't predict the timing. It was pulverized between rocks that weighed millions of tons each. On the Iron Talon, General Vorthak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 3 of his best ships, destroyed in minutes by flying rocks and a single human pilot. "How?" he whispered. Captain Rix studied the sensor data with growing respect for their enemy. "Sir, this human isn't just lucky. He knows these fields better than our computers do. He's using the asteroids as weapons." For the first time in his military career, General Vorthak felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. He was facing an enemy who didn't fight like any Crithian he knew, an enemy who turned his own strength against him. "Pull back," he ordered quietly. "We wait." But deep down, he knew this human had already won the first round. The Crimson Nebula was the perfect hiding place. Its dense gas clouds blocked most sensors, and the radiation made it too dangerous for large military ships to enter safely. Ji-won had found a small pocket of stable space near the nebula's heart, where they could rest and plan their next move. Nala sat cross-legged on the floor of Ji-won's tiny cargo bay, watching him work on a piece of salvaged Krithian equipment. Her royal dress had been replaced with practical clothes from his emergency supplies, though they were comically small on her tall frame. She looked nothing like the terrified princess who had appeared on his ship a week ago. "Explain this to..." "Me again," she said, holding up a simple metal tube that Ji-won had been modifying. "How does this tiny device defeat a warship?" Ji-won looked up from his work, a smudge of grease on his cheek. "It doesn't defeat the warship directly. It defeats the people controlling the warship." He took the device and pointed to its components. "This is a signal jammer. We hide it on a supply ship going to Vorthak's fleet. When activated, it blocks all communications between ships for about 10 minutes. And then what?" "Then they start shooting each other?" Nala blinked in confusion. "Why would they do that?" "Because that's what happens when military people can't talk to each other during a crisis," Ji-won explained patiently. "Your people follow strict military protocols, right? Chain of command, proper formations, coordinated attacks?" "Of course. Order and discipline are the foundation of Krithian military strength." "Exactly. And that's also your weakness." Ji-won sat down across from her, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm of a teacher sharing his favorite subject. "Human military history is full of examples where organized armies defeated themselves through confusion and miscommunication. During the Battle of Titan Colony, pirate raiders used fake distress signals to trick two colonial navy fleets into fighting each other. By the time they figured out the trick, half their ships were destroyed. Nala tried to wrap her mind around this concept. In Krithian culture, honor came from facing your enemy directly, fleet against fleet, the strongest side winning through superior force. The idea of using deception and trickery felt wrong somehow. "But that's not honorable combat," she said. Slowly, "Honor doesn't stop plasma bolts," Ji-won replied bluntly. "My people learned that lesson the hard way. When humans first started exploring space, we tried to fight like everyone else. Big fleets, direct attacks, conventional tactics. We got crushed every time, so we adapted. We learned to fight smarter instead of harder." He pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of the Krithian Empire. Red markers indicated Vorthak's forces, while blue dots showed rebel activity. The rebels were scattered and weak, tiny islands of resistance in an ocean of imperial control. "Look at this," Ji-won continued. "Your rebels are trying to fight Vorthak the traditional way. They gather their ships, attack his bases, and get destroyed because he has more firepower. They're playing his game by his rules. What would you do differently?" "I wouldn't fight his ships at all. I'd fight his supply lines, his communications, his ability to control his forces. Every military in history depends on 3 things: food, fuel, and information. Take away any of those, and even the strongest army becomes helpless." Nala stood up and began pacing, her mind racing. "You're talking about attacking civilian targets. Supply ships, communication stations, fuel depots. Those aren't military objectives." "They're not civilian either," Ji-won corrected gently. "They're military support infrastructure, and most importantly, they're lightly defended. Vorthak puts all his best troops on his warships, not on supply convoys." Over the next few hours, Ji-won walked Nala through dozens of historical examples. He told her about the Earth resistance during the Martian occupation, when a few thousand guerrilla fighters tied down 500,000 occupation troops for 3 years. He explained how the Colonial Alliance defeated the Centauri Empire by attacking mining operations instead of military bases, forcing the enemy to spread their forces too thin to be effective. "The key is to never fight fair," he concluded. "Fair fights are for sports, not survival." Nala found herself thinking about her people's situation in completely new ways. The rebels on Kythera Prime have been trying to liberate the planet for 2 years. They keep attacking the orbital defense stations and getting slaughtered. What would happen if they attacked the power grid instead? The orbital stations would lose power. Nala's eyes widened as she understood. They'd be defenseless, and Vorthak would have to choose between reinforcing the planet or keeping his fleet together. Either choice weakens him somewhere else. They spent the rest of the day modifying captured Crithian equipment, turning military-grade technology into tools that ordinary rebels could build and use. Ji-won's engineering background proved invaluable as he simplified complex systems and found ways to mass-produce them using common materials. This communication scrambler can be built in any electronics shop, he explained, showing Nala the modified design. And this explosive charge uses fertilizer and cleaning supplies that every colony has in storage. You're teaching me to be a terrorist, Nala said quietly. I'm teaching you to win, Ji-won replied. There's a difference between terrorism and resistance. Terrorists attack innocent people to spread fear. Resistance fighters attack military targets to weaken oppression. The choice of targets defines the morality. As the days passed, they reached out to rebel cells throughout the Empire using Nala's royal access codes and Ji-won's encrypted communication techniques. Slowly, they began building a network of fighters who understood the human way of war. This is going to change everything, Nala realized, watching confirmation signals come in from dozens of rebel groups. That's the idea, Ji-won smiled. Time to teach General Vorthak that bigger isn't always better. The first sign that everything was changing came on a Tuesday morning in the Altara system. Commander Hrok was leading a routine supply convoy to one of Vorthak's forward bases when his communications suddenly went dead. One moment he was talking to his escort ships, the next moment there was only static. Then the fuel tanker at the back of his convoy simply exploded. By the time Hrok's ships turned around to investigate, the attackers were gone. No enemy ships on sensors, no trace of where they had come from or where they went. Just a destroyed tanker and a message burned into a nearby asteroid. The princess lives. The rebellion grows. Within hours, similar attacks were happening across the Empire. Not the big, dramatic fleet battles that Crithian military doctrine expected, but small, precise strikes that seemed to come from nowhere. A communication relay destroyed here, a fuel depot sabotaged there, supply convoys disappearing without a trace. On the mining world of Zerion 7, a team of rebels led by an ex-soldier named Captain Bok received their first shipment of human-designed equipment. The devices looked simple compared to standard Crithian military gear, but they worked exactly as Ji-won had promised. Small explosive charges that could be hidden in cargo containers, signal jammers that fit in a pocket, communication scramblers. That could be built in any workshop. "This is it?" asked Bok's lieutenant, holding up one of the simple metal tubes. "This is supposed to help us fight the Empire." "Watch and learn," Bok replied. He had been a communications officer before joining the rebellion and understood better than most how the Imperial military depended on constant contact between its units. That night, they planted the jammers on 3 different supply ships heading to General Vorthak's main base. When the devices activated simultaneously, they created a dead zone of communication chaos that lasted just long enough for the rebels to strike. They didn't attack the base itself. That would have been suicide. Instead, they hit the power station. That supplied the base, the water treatment facility, and the landing pad control tower. Within 6 hours, the most important military installation in the sector was reduced to using emergency power and hand signals. The base commander, General Tark, found himself unable to coordinate his defenses or call for reinforcements. When he finally re-established communications, half his support infrastructure was destroyed, and the rebels had vanished back into the civilian population. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. On Krylon Prime, rebels used Ji-won's fertilizer bomb recipe to destroy 3 fuel refineries in one night. On the industrial world of Mekros, resistance fighters shut down the main computer network that controlled factory production, bringing military equipment manufacturing to a halt. On the agricultural world of Verde, farmers who had been secretly supporting the rebellion poisoned the food supplies heading to Vorthak's fleet, forcing thousands of soldiers into medical treatment, the Yai. Beauty of these attacks was their simplicity. They didn't require expensive military equipment or years of training. Ordinary citizens could build the weapons in their homes and carry out operations with minimal risk. More importantly, when one cell was discovered and destroyed, it didn't compromise the others. General Vorthak found himself fighting an enemy he couldn't understand. His war room had become a nightmare of red markers, indicating attacks, supply disruptions, and communication failures. Every day brought new reports of infrastructure damage and supply shortages. "How many rebels are we facing?" he demanded during one particularly frustrating briefing. "Intelligence estimates suggest several thousand active fighters across 47 worlds," reported his aide, Colonel Vex. "Several thousand?" Vorthak slammed his fist on the table. "I have 2 million soldiers under my command. How can a few thousand rebels cause this much damage?" "Sir, they're not fighting like traditional rebels. They avoid direct confrontation and focus on support targets. Our forces are trained for ship-to-ship combat, not counter-insurgency operations. But the real problem went deeper than tactics. The rebellion was spreading because it offered hope. For years, ordinary Krithians had suffered under Vorthak's brutal rule, watching him seize more power while their lives became harder. The princess's escape had shown them that the general could be defeated. The successful rebel attacks proved that resistance was possible. In his prison within the imperial palace, Emperor Kyle received secret messages from loyal servants about his daughter's activities. Despite his captivity, he felt proud. For the first time in months, Nala had grown from a sheltered princess into a true leader, one who understood that sometimes the best way to serve your people was to break the rules that oppressed them. "She's becoming more than I ever was," he whispered to himself, reading reports of another successful rebel operation. The old Krithian way of warfare, massive fleets meeting in honorable combat, was becoming obsolete. In its place, a new kind of conflict was emerging, one where intelligence mattered more than firepower, where creativity defeated conventional strength, and where a few determined people could change the fate of an entire empire. General Vorthak was slowly realizing that he wasn't just fighting Princess Nala and her human ally anymore. He was fighting an idea, the idea that ordinary people could resist tyranny and win. And ideas, as human history had proven many times, were much harder to kill than rebels. The empire was changing, one small victory at a time. The abandoned mining Station Omega-9 floated in the void between two dead solar systems, forgotten by the Empire for over a decade. Its tunnels had once echoed with the sounds of workers extracting rare crystals, but now they served a very different purpose. Deep in the station's converted cargo bays, G1 had created something that had never existed before: a school for revolution. "Forget everything you know about fighting," G1 told the 30 Krithian rebels gathered in the main training room. They came from all walks of life: former soldiers who had refused Vorthak's orders, miners who had lost their families to imperial brutality, merchants whose businesses had been destroyed by military taxes. What they all shared was desperation and a willingness to learn. "But we are warriors," protested Dek, a former Imperial Marine whose unit had been disbanded for questioning orders. "We know how to fight." "You know how to fight other Krithians," G1 corrected. "You know honor duels, formation combat, ship-to-ship warfare. That's exactly why you keep losing." G1 walked to a holographic display, showing two armies facing each other across an open field. "This is how your people have fought for thousands of years. Two forces meet. The stronger one wins, honor is preserved. It's clean, it's fair, and it gets you killed when your enemy has bigger guns." He changed the display to show a different scene: small groups of fighters hiding in terrain, striking quickly, then disappearing. "This is how humans learn to fight. We call it asymmetric warfare. The goal isn't to be honorable. The goal is to win." Princess Nala stepped forward to address the skeptical faces. Over the past month, she had transformed from a sheltered royal into something her people had never seen before: a princess who got her hands dirty. Her crystalline skin now bore the scars of training accidents, and her royal bearing had been replaced by the practical confidence of someone who had learned to survive. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "This goes against everything we were taught about proper combat. But look where proper combat has gotten us. Vorthak controls the Empire because he has more ships and more soldiers. We can't beat him playing by his rules." The first lesson was the hardest for the Krithian warriors to accept: learning to run away. In their culture, retreat was shameful, a sign of cowardice. G1 had to completely rewire their thinking. "Running away isn't losing," he explained, setting up a training scenario. Running away is repositioning for a better attack. Watch this. He divided them into two groups. The first group, playing Imperial forces, had superior numbers and weapons. The second group, playing rebels, had inferior equipment but knowledge of the terrain. When the Imperials attacked, the rebels immediately scattered and hid. "This is cowardice," muttered Kor, another former soldier. "Wait for it," Jiwon said patiently. The rebels let the Imperials advance deep into the mock battlefield, then struck from behind while they were spread out and confused. Within minutes, the superior force was defeated by opponents they couldn't even see properly. "The humans have a saying," Nala added, seeing the dawning understanding on their faces. "He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day." The next lessons covered psychological warfare, the art of making your enemy defeat himself through fear and confusion. Jiwon taught them how to use fake radio transmissions to send enemy units to the wrong locations, how to plant false intelligence. That would make commanders doubt their own allies. How to create the impression of being everywhere at once when you were actually nowhere to be found. "Information is a weapon," he explained, showing them how to analyze enemy communication patterns. "If you know how they think, you can predict what they'll do before they do it." The Crithians struggled with these concepts at first. Their minds were trained for direct, honest combat, but as they practiced, they began to see the elegant logic behind human tactics. Why fight 100 enemies when you could trick 50 of them into fighting the other 50? Nala proved to be a natural teacher, able to translate human concepts into terms her people could understand. She also discovered she had a talent for the kind of quick, adaptive thinking that made human tactics work. "Your people are incredibly strong and fast," Jiwon observed during one of their private strategy sessions. "But you're also predictable. You follow patterns, stick to protocols. Humans survive because we're unpredictable. We change tactics in the middle of a fight." "Like you did in the asteroid field," Nala realized. "Exactly. Vorthak expected me to run in a straight line or hide and wait for rescue. He didn't expect me to use the asteroids as weapons." As the weeks passed, their partnership evolved beyond teacher and student. They began thinking as a team, finishing each other's tactical plans, building on each other's ideas. Nala's deep knowledge of Crithian military structure combined with Jiwon's understanding of unconventional warfare created strategies that neither could have developed alone. "You're not just teaching us new tactics," Nala said one evening as they reviewed intelligence reports. "You're teaching us to think differently about everything, about power, about victory, about what's possible." "That's the real secret," Jiwon replied. "Humans don't accept that anything is impossible. We just haven't figured out how to do it yet. Your people say, this is how things are. Humans say, this is how things could be." The rebels gradually became something new. Crithian, warriors with human minds, combining the best of both species. They learned to think 3 steps ahead, to see weakness in strength, to turn their enemies' advantages into liabilities, and in the process they became something that General Vorthak had never faced before, an enemy that refused to fight fair. The news came through an encrypted rebel communication channel at 0300 hours. Nala was reviewing supply manifests when the message arrived, and the words hit her like a physical blow. "Massacre on Thyrus Colony. 2,000 civilians executed. Imperial." Forces claimed they were rebel sympathizers. Her hands shook as she read the details. Families torn from their homes in the middle of the night. Men, women, and children lined up in the town square. General Vorthak's troops firing into the crowd while their commander watched from his command ship, broadcasting the executions across the planet as a warning to other potential rebels. Jiwon found her an hour later, sitting alone in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars with tears streaming down her crystalline cheeks. He had never seen her cry before, not even during their most desperate battles. "It's my fault," she whispered without looking at him. "Those people died because of me, because I ran away instead of accepting my fate." "No," Jiwon said firmly, sitting beside her. "Those people died because Vorthak is a monster who kills innocent civilians to maintain power. Don't let him put their blood on your hands. But if I had married him, if I had stayed, then he would have killed different people for different reasons," Jiwon interrupted. Tyrants don't need excuses to commit atrocities, they just need opportunities. More reports came in over the following days. Mass arrests on Kepler Prime, public executions on New Krythus, entire families disappearing into imperial detention centers, never to be seen again. Vorthak was using terror as a weapon, trying to break the rebellion's spirit by making the cost of resistance unbearable. The strategy was working. Several rebel cells sent messages begging Nala to surrender, saying they couldn't watch more innocents die. Others simply went silent, either captured or too frightened to continue fighting. "Maybe they're right," Nala said during one of their strategy meetings. "Maybe I should give myself up, end this before more people suffer." "And then what?" G1 asked. "You think Vorthak stops killing people once he gets what he wants? You think he forgives everyone who supported you? At least the killing would stop." "No, it wouldn't. It would just become more organized." G1 pulled up historical records on his computer. This is what happened on Earth during the corporate wars. The resistance leaders surrendered to save civilian lives. 6 months later, the corporations had executed every former rebel, their families, and anyone who had ever expressed sympathy for the cause. Total death count, 12 million people. Nala stared at the numbers in horror. 12 million? Surrendering to a tyrant doesn't save lives, it just gives them time to kill more efficiently. G1's voice was gentle but firm. "The only way to stop Vorthak is to remove him from power completely. But how? Every time we fight back, he murders more innocents. We're trapped." "No, we're not. We just need to change the game again." G1 began pulling up technical specifications for Imperial communication networks. Vorthak's greatest weapon isn't his fleet or his army. It's his control of information. He decides what the Krithian people see and hear. Most of them probably don't even know about the massacres. The Imperial news networks only broadcast approved content, Nala confirmed. Citizens in the core worlds might think the outer colonies are just having minor civil disturbances. Then we show them the truth. Over the next week, they planned the most audacious operation in the rebellion's history. Instead of attacking military targets, they would strike at something far more valuable: the Empire's central broadcasting facility on the capital world of Krithia Prime. The facility was protected by multiple defense grids and an entire fleet of guard ships. A direct assault would be suicide. But G1 had studied human information warfare tactics, and he knew that the most effective attacks didn't require explosions or invasions. "We don't need to destroy the facility," he explained to their team of tech specialists. "We just need to get inside their broadcast stream for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes, asked Lin, their communications expert. "What can we accomplish in 10 minutes? We can show the entire Empire who Vorthak really is." Using captured Imperial equipment and modified human technology, they created a signal booster powerful enough to override the capital's broadcast network. The technical challenge was enormous. They needed to break through military-grade encryption while staying hidden from the security forces hunting them. But the real challenge was gathering the evidence. For weeks, rebel cells across the Empire risked their lives to document Vorthak's atrocities. Hidden cameras recorded executions. Surviving witnesses gave testimony. Former Imperial soldiers who had defected provided classified orders showing that the massacres were planned from the highest levels. "This is it," Nala said, reviewing the compiled evidence. Hours of footage showing Imperial troops murdering civilians, burning villages, and torturing prisoners. Documents with Vorthak's personal signature ordering the deaths of entire populations. Audio recordings of the general laughing while describing his plans to eliminate rebel contamination from conquered worlds. "The question is," G1 said quietly, "are you ready for what happens next? Once we broadcast this, there's no going back. Vorthak will know exactly where the leak came from." "Good," Nala replied, her voice hard with determination. "Let him know. Let the entire Empire know that Princess Nala of Krithia condemns his crimes and calls for his removal. He'll hunt us with everything he has. Then we'd better make those 10 minutes count." As they prepared for the broadcast, Nala realized something important had changed inside her. The frightened princess who had fled her wedding was gone, replaced by someone willing to risk everything for her people's freedom. The innocents who had died weren't her responsibility. They were her motivation. Vorthak wanted her to feel guilty for their deaths. Instead, she felt angry. And anger, as humans had proven throughout history, could be a very dangerous weapon. The broadcast had worked better than anyone expected. Within hours of showing Vorthak's crimes to the entire empire, spontaneous uprisings erupted on dozens of worlds. Imperial governors found themselves barricaded in their compounds, while angry crowds demanded justice. Even some of Vorthak's own officers began questioning their loyalty to a commander who murdered children for political gain. But the general's response was swift and brutal. He declared martial law across the empire and announced that Princess Nala had exactly 24 hours to surrender herself, or he would execute her father, Emperor Kael, live on Imperial television. "It's a trap," G1 said, as they watched Vorthak's ultimatum broadcast from their hidden base. "He knows you'll come for your father. He's counting on it." "Of course it's a trap," Nala replied, already suiting up in combat armor. "But I can't let him kill my father to get to me. Some things are worth walking into a trap for. Then we spring it on our terms, not his." The imperial capital of Krithia Prime was a fortress world, protected by orbital defense platforms and patrolled by hundreds of warships. The palace itself sat in the center of a military district, surrounded by guard towers and energy barriers. Any conventional assault would fail before it began. But G1 had spent weeks studying the palace's blueprints, focusing not on the obvious entrances, but on the infrastructure that kept the massive complex running. "Every building needs air, water, power, and waste disposal," he explained to their small strike team. "The bigger the building, the bigger the maintenance systems." The maintenance tunnels beneath the palace were a maze of pipes, cables, and ventilation shafts that stretched for kilometers. They were designed to be accessible only to automated repair systems, too small and complex for human-sized security forces to patrol effectively, but that also made them perfect for infiltration. "The Krithians build everything oversized," G1 observed as they crawled through a water recycling tunnel that was barely wide enough for his shoulders. These passages could fit 3 humans, but they never considered that someone might use them to break in. Nala, despite her larger frame, moved through the tunnels with surprising grace. Her royal education had included physical training, but, more importantly, she had learned to think like G1, seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles. "Security checkpoint ahead," whispered Tech, their electronics specialist, monitoring his scanner. 3 guards, automated weapons, sensor grid. "Can we go around?" asked Nala. "Not without adding 2 hours to our route," Tech replied, "and we'll miss the window when the guard shifts change." G1 studied the tunnel junction ahead. The checkpoint was designed to stop armed intruders coming through the main passages, but the designers had made a classic mistake. They had focused on the threat they expected instead of the threat that might actually come. There, he pointed to a power conduit, running along the ceiling. "The sensor grid gets its power from that cable. If we can create a brief overload..." "The sensors go blind for about 30 seconds while the backup systems activate," Nala finished, understanding immediately. "Exactly. But we need perfect timing." Using techniques they had practiced dozens of times, they synchronized their movements. Tech overloaded the power conduit at the exact moment that G1 and Nala dropped from the ceiling behind the guards. By the time the sensors came back online, the guards were unconscious and the infiltrators were through the checkpoint. "Your royal access codes still work," G1 observed as Nala's genetic signature opened a series of sealed doors. "Vorthak hasn't changed the palace security protocols." "He's arrogant," Nala replied. "He probably thinks he has complete control over palace systems. Or he wants us to get this far," G1 said quietly. "This feels too easy." They emerged from the maintenance tunnels into the palace's lower levels, moving through corridors that Nala had walked as a child. But everything felt different now. The grand architecture seemed oppressive, the royal portraits looked like the faces of strangers, and the silence felt threatening rather than peaceful. "The throne room is 2 levels up," Nala whispered as they approached the main elevator shaft. "But there will be guards!" "Princess Nala." They spun around to find General Vorthak standing behind them, flanked by a dozen elite soldiers. He was smiling, and Nala realized with growing horror that he looked completely relaxed, as if he had been expecting them at this exact time and place. You're more predictable than I thought, Vorthak continued conversationally. Did you really think I wouldn't monitor the maintenance tunnels? Did you believe your royal codes would work if I didn't want them to? You let us get this far, Ji-won said, his hand moving slowly toward his weapon. Of course I did. I wanted the princess to come to me willingly. Saves so much trouble. Vorthak's smile widened. Your father is indeed in the throne room, princess. Very much alive for now. But whether he stays that way depends entirely on how cooperative you're feeling. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Vorthak held up a hand. No need for violence yet. The princess is going to walk to the throne room like a good daughter, and her human pet is going to surrender his weapons like a good prisoner. And if we refuse? Nala asked. Then your father dies, followed by every rebel leader we've captured, followed by a few thousand randomly selected civilians. I have kill orders prepared for 12 different worlds. One word from me and they all burn. Nala looked at Ji-won, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They had walked into exactly the trap they had expected, but knowing it was a trap didn't make it any less effective. Vorthak held all the cards. Her father's life, the lives of captured rebels, the lives of innocent civilians. Tick-tock, princess, Vorthak said softly. Your father is waiting. But as they began the march to the throne room, Ji-won caught Nala's eye and gave the slightest of nods. The trap was sprung, but the game wasn't over yet. They still had one card left to play, one that Vorthak didn't know about. The throne room of the Crithian Empire was a monument to absolute power. Massive crystalline pillars stretched toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars themselves, while the Emperor's throne sat on a raised platform that forced visitors to look up in submission. But today, the ancient seat of power looked different. Emperor Kael sat chained to his own throne, bruised and weakened but still alive. General Vorthak stood beside him, one hand resting on his weapon, the other on a control device that could send death orders to 12 worlds. Welcome home, princess, Vorthak said as his soldiers forced Nala and Ji-won into the room. I trust you enjoyed your little rebellion. It ends now. Nala walked forward slowly, her eyes never leaving her father's face. The old emperor tried to smile at his daughter, but she could see the pain and defeat in his expression. Months of imprisonment had taken their toll. You've won, she said to Vorthak. I surrender. But release the prisoners, spare the civilians, and let my father live out his remaining years in peace. Oh, I'm afraid that's not how this works, Vorthak laughed. You see, I've learned something from your human friend here about the power of symbols. Your father represents the old empire, weak, sentimental, ruled by outdated ideas about honor and mercy. He must die publicly to show that a new era has begun. And what era is that? Ji-won asked, speaking for the first time since entering the room. The era of strength, Vorthak replied. No more democracy councils, no more debates about civilian rights, no more weakness disguised as compassion. The Crithian Empire will become what it was always meant to be, the dominant force in this galaxy. Sounds familiar, Ji-won said quietly. There was a human leader once who said similar things. His name was, I don't care about human history. Vorthak snapped. Your species is barely out of its caves. What could you possibly teach us about power? We could teach you about what happens to leaders who think power comes from fear alone, Ji-won replied. They usually end up dead, or in hiding. Vorthak's hand tightened on his weapon. You're in no position to threaten me, human. I'm not threatening you, Ji-won said with a slight smile. I'm just making an observation about historical patterns. What Vorthak didn't know was that everything happening in the throne room was being broadcast live across the empire. The same rebel technical team that had hijacked the communication network before had done it again, this time using equipment hidden throughout the palace during the infiltration. Every word, every gesture, every moment of the confrontation was being transmitted to millions of Crithians who were finally seeing their would-be emperor as he really was. You talk about strength, Nala said, stepping closer to Vorthak. But everything you've done shows weakness. You couldn't win my loyalty, so you tried to force it. You couldn't defeat the rebellion through military might, so you murdered innocent civilians. You couldn't earn the respect of your own officers, so you ruled them through terror. Silence. Vorthak raised his weapon. I have the power here. Do you? Nala asked. Look around, General. Really look. For the first time, Vorthak seemed to notice that something was wrong. The soldiers who had escorted them to the throne room were exchanging uncertain glances. Officers who should have been standing at attention were whispering among themselves. Even his most loyal supporters looked uncomfortable. "What's happening?" he demanded. "What's happening?" said Colonel Vex, his second-in-command, stepping forward with a datapad. "Is that the entire Empire is watching this conversation. They've seen you threaten to murder the rightful emperor. They've heard you admit to ordering the massacre of civilians. They've watched you hold a weapon to an unarmed princess." Vorthak spun around, finally understanding the trap he had walked into. "You're lying!" "Check the communication logs yourself," Vex replied, offering him the datapad. "Every broadcast station in the Empire is carrying this signal. Your own propaganda network is broadcasting your confession." The general's face went pale as he read the transmission data. Millions of viewers across dozens of worlds were watching him lose control in real time. Reports were already coming in of imperial governors being arrested by their own security forces, of fleet commanders declaring their loyalty to Princess Nala, of entire star systems announcing their rejection of his authority. "This changes nothing," Vorthak said desperately. "I still have the kill codes. I can still destroy those 12 worlds." "No, you can't," said Captain Rix, another of his former supporters. "We've already countermanded those orders. The fleet commanders refused to carry them out once they learned the truth about the civilian massacres." Vorthak looked around the throne room and saw his power crumbling in real time. Officers who had followed him out of fear or ambition were now stepping away, unwilling to be associated with a leader who had lost all legitimacy. The empire he had tried to build through, terror was rejecting him completely. "This isn't over," he snarled, raising his weapon toward Nala, but Jiwon was already moving. The human combat training that had seemed so inferior to Krithian's strength proved its worth in close quarters. While Vorthak was focused on the princess, Jiwon disarmed him with a simple technique that used the general's own momentum against him. The weapon went flying, clattering across the crystal floor. "It is over," Nala said firmly, as Imperial guards moved to arrest their former commander. "Your empire of fear ends now." Within hours, General Vorthak was in custody, and Princess Nala was addressing the empire from her father's throne. But her first act wasn't to claim absolute power. It was to announce the formation of a constitutional assembly that would give every world in the empire a voice in its government. "My human partner taught me something important," she said to the cameras that broadcast her words across the stars. "True strength doesn't come from forcing others to obey you. It comes from inspiring them to follow you willingly." Jiwon stood beside her, no longer a reluctant ally, but a genuine partner. In rebuilding an entire civilization, their marriage, which had begun as a desperate escape, had become something neither of them expected. A partnership between equals that would help transform the galaxy itself. The old empire of fear was dead. In its place, something new was being born. A civilization where humans and Krithians would work together as equals among the stars.